don't believe what we do, then you're dangerous and you're evil. Your lack of alignment on this issue disqualifies you from having any valuable opinion. Anything outside of the popular narrative is foolish and makes you stupid. If you don't know that I'm on the same page as you, I won't have any friends. It's important to be on the right side. It's more important, in fact, to be on the right side of the conversation than actually to be correct. Everybody needs to know all the good deeds that I do so that I get recognized for them. If people don't know the good I do, they'll never accept me. Ever heard or thought of that before? Has that ever crossed your mind, some of those thoughts? Have you ever had those conversations about the world around us? Where we so deeply value being valued by other people. We want to be a part of the team. We want to be accepted, right? That's so important. Sometimes it can get us into trouble though. And sometimes in my life, it's actually been totally irrational how I've behaved to gain that type of acceptance. Let me give you an example. When I was about 19 years old, I went to a CD store. Now I know most of you probably have never seen a CD store because even for me, I was trying to remember the last time I bought a CD and it was probably like 9 years ago. But this is like when they were really still clinging on for life. Like I would still go once a month, go pick up a couple albums, play them in my car. And it seems super primitive now because of Spotify and Apple Music, but like it wasn't that long ago that this was what I would do. And like the mainline stores were like HMV and they were at every mall. But I remember one time I went to a mall in Sherwood Park, at the Sherwood Park Mall. Now let me tell you, I don't live in Sherwood Park. I've never lived in Sherwood Park. To each their own, but I probably will never in my life live in Sherwood Park. I wasn't going to return at any time in the future. But I went to the mall there and there was a like one single CD store. This wasn't like a chain. This was like the Sherwood Park Mall. It was like someone opened it privately and this was not an important place, let me tell you that. But I bought a CD. Can't remember what it was, probably some pop punk album. And I decided that I needed to buy it. So I went to the till and I put it there and she's like, okay, I'll be like, $15 or whatever. But she's like, are you a club member? Listen, I was not a club member, but I felt this pressure. Like there was people around me who had their club cards and for some reason, I don't know why I felt like I couldn't say no. I was like, yes. It's a blatant lie. I was not a club member. But whatever, nothing's really gonna come of it. Like, that's fine. And she's like, oh, okay, do you have your club card? It's like, not on me. Not on me, it's at home. Okay, well, we'll just look in the system then for, what's your name? Like Jeff Kiers, how do you spell that? Whatever. Yeah, you're not, what's your phone number? Oh yeah, it's probably under my phone number. Yeah, no, it's not, I gave my phone number last time. Yeah, well, give my phone number. Still not here. I'm like, that's super weird because I'm definitely a club member, let me tell you. I'm a member of this CD store in Sherwood Park that I've never seen before. And then she's like, yeah, you're not in the system. Well, I guess, we could just add you again. I'm like, yeah, for sure, yeah, because I definitely value being a part of this team. It's important to me. She's like, that'll be $20, please. So there's two lessons here. Number one, lies quickly spread out of control. The little lies grow really quickly. We could talk a whole 20 minutes on that. But I don't know why I felt this pressure, like I couldn't say no. Like, are you a member of the club? I was like, yes. And it just got me into so much trouble. I was willing to compromise, not just my integrity on the issue, but I was actually willing to compromise my money financially on this for something that I didn't value, something that wasn't important, but it just mattered in the moment for me to be a part of that club or that team and that I was willing to do almost anything, even if it made me look like a complete moron. That was where I was at. I want to talk about that tonight. There's a force, there's a powerful force in our culture, in our society, and it actually drives us psychologically, it drives us emotionally. It's a huge part of how we live our daily lives. There's increasing pressure for us to be molding our life towards this idea, towards this thing. And if you don't align with it, it actually seems to cause tons of problems. And I'm not talking about one of the things that drives us more than anything else, which is sex, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's not social media, though it plays in that world a little bit. I'm talking about virtue and virtue signaling. Now that means a lot of different things for a lot of people, right? It means a lot of things. To some people think that it means one thing and it falls on one side of the political spectrum, or it lands on a different issue, and you think about somebody different. When you think about somebody virtue signaling, you think about a different type of person. But very rarely do we ever think about ourselves. We don't think about us being involved in that. Because what I care about isn't just virtue signaling. What I care about isn't not valuable. I'm not just showing off. It's actually valuable because that's my perspective. But this is something that is driving our society, and I think that we need to talk about it. So what is virtue signaling? Virtue signaling basically is defined as an expression of moral opinion on a subject meant to make one look good or like a good person to a specific group of people. Now, this could mean a lot of different things, like I said, to a lot of different people. But at the end of the day, what it drives us towards is to look good, to do anything we can to make sure that the world around us knows that we're on the same page, that the world around us knows that we are not in misalignment, and that basically it's a fear of being disowned, or some like to use the word canceled, by the society around you. So why is that? Well, it's going to look different, like I said, to you than someone else. But it comes down to an actual thing that is inherently built into us psychologically and socially. There's a book called The Culture Code. It's by Daniel Coyle. And he explains that humans have this inherent thing for survival. It's a cultural survival mechanism that we have and that we can't really escape, where we actually take on the isms or the culture of the people around us. We signal to the group or to the tribe around us that we want to be a part of the same thing because it's for survival. It's been around for thousands of years. So what does that mean? Well, if you go back to those thousands of years ago when it was tribal and people wanted to be liked because it meant a big deal for you to be able to live longer. Right? Like for me, I wouldn't be very good at sewing things. Like if we needed to make clothes out of, I don't even know what you would make clothes out of. That's how, if it's not Amazon or going online, like what would I do to get clothes? I don't know. So if I had to sew clothes together, if I had to make it, that would be a problem come winter because I wouldn't have any. So I want to make sure the tribe likes me. I want to make sure that people like me so that I can go to the people who know how to make clothes and they'll make me clothes to keep me warm in the winter. Or maybe you're thinking if the world fell apart and there was no more grocery stores and you had to hunt for your food, how well would you do? Well, if you know a hunter, you might be able to get some food. Or a farmer, someone who knows how to grow plants, you would want to be liked by them as well, because if they don't like you, if they don't trust you, they're probably not going to share their food with you. And this psychology actually goes into so many different areas. We want to make sure that people like us. In the business world, there was tests done that showed that if you had a board meeting or a staff meeting and the vast majority of people, or even just one person who has some sort of social authority in the room, and they start acting a certain way, if they're very attentive and involved, and that's kind of the culture they bring to the table, then the general culture in the room, the people will follow along with that as well. If they're sluggish, tired, yawning, don't care, people start to slouch in their chairs. They start to act the same way. They go with the flow. They go with the crowd. Have you ever hung out with a new group of friends and started to pick up some of the ways that they talk? Like some weird slang that only that person says, and you catch yourself saying it. It's kind of like when you go to the States or anywhere in the world and they're like, oh, you said A, and you're like, oh, you can't stop saying A. I've never noticed it before. But actually that's where not just slang, but actually accents come from. That's why when you hang out with people in another country who have an accent, you start to pick it up. It's a mechanism in your mind that actually makes you start to pick up on those cues. And it's for survival. And this isn't just in that space. That drives us in so many different ways to try and make sure that the crowd around us trusts us, that a crowd around us wants to be with us. And that's not a bad thing inherently. Obviously, you should want to be liked. That's just a natural thing. You shouldn't want to be disliked. No, that's not a good person. But when it actually starts to come at a consequence, when it actually starts to come at a consequence to what is right or a consequence to what we actually believe or what we know, that becomes an issue. It becomes a huge issue. So we want to be trusted, we want to be kind, but we also don't want to just be throwing things out there. We don't want to just be virtue signaling so that people like us, even if we don't agree or don't believe in what we're doing. But at the same time, we're scared that we're going to get called out on a story, that people won't like me, they'll unfollow me, they'll abandon me. And that's terrifying. Let's look at the Bible. There's a guy named Paul. He wrote a good chunk of the New Testament, second half of the Bible. And in this document called Galatians, he's writing to a church in a place called Galatia. And in Galatians 2:11-16, it says this. He's telling a story to the church. It says, when Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him to his face, for what he did was very wrong. When he first arrived, he ate with the Gentile believers who were not circumcised. But afterwards, when some friends of James came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of criticism from these people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. As a result, other Jewish believers followed Peter's hypocrisy, and even Barnabas, who was a leader at the time in the church, was led astray by their hypocrisy. Let's take a look at this before we continue further. Circumcision is a medical procedure that Jewish boys had where they had a snip on their downstairs, right? It was a aesthetic thing, but it was cultural, really only exclusively to them. So Gentiles, if you don't know that term, is actually basically that isn't Jewish. And within the culture, there was a lot of pride in the Jewish people, right? Like, because they were God's chosen people. And it led to a sense of ethnocentrism. It created this sense of we're better than everyone else. And one of the rallying points was this act of circumcision, which, they were very proud of it culturally. It's kind of like a jean jacket or a mullet in Canada, but a lot less socially acceptable to talk about at parties. But it was this thing that they cared about, right? Like it was a marker of pride for them in their culture. And when this actually was a part of the law before Jesus came, this was a part of a lot of different today we would see them as very legalistic laws that were in place for the Jewish people. Like, you don't eat pork, you have to, the Sabbath, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, and you had to not do anything. You basically, if you even picked up the wrong thing on the Sabbath, on the day of rest, you were seen as sinning. And this was another thing that was like a must. If you want to follow God, you have to have this medical procedure that normally happens when you're a baby and it's not that traumatic. But if you're a grown adult and have to have it, from what I understand, you're going to actually be bedridden and ruined for a week. Like, it's a horrific procedure to have happen. And this was a marker of pride. So what's happening here is now that Jesus came into the picture, Jesus says you no longer have to follow the law the same way. He didn't throw it away, but he fulfills the law. This no longer is a marker in what you have to do. But there was groups within it. This was so culturally ingrained. There was so much pride in this that even the Jewish people who believed in Jesus and believed Jesus was God, and even though they knew that they're saved and that your relationship with God comes through belief in Jesus and what he did on the cross, that they still felt that this was necessary. So imagine if you were to bring a friend to the project and you said that you had to have a medical procedure on your genitals be a part of the team. How many people are going to want to do that? Very few. And especially if it's not true, it seems a little extra to me. Fair enough? That's what they were running into. But this group of people felt that it was still a big deal. And this seems like something super silly to be arguing about, but this was a major social issue within the church at this time. And what happens is Peter, who Paul is referencing here, he would have been a guy that actually was one of Jesus' disciples. He hung out with him. He met him. He saw him in person. He should know better. And he's hanging out with these new Gentile believers. He's hanging out with these people that are not traditionally Jewish. They weren't born into Jewish homes, but they're a part of the community. The gospel has been opened up to them by the actions of Jesus, and finds himself suddenly with Jewish people coming in, and he's scared about what they're going to think. Because socially, that's unacceptable. Socially, that's not virtuous. Socially, he's going to just be cast out. He's worried about what this will do to his clout. He's worried about what this will do to his social longevity. And he goes away and he pretends that he has no time for these people, and he hangs out with the in crowd, with the Jewish believers, the people that think that they aren't good enough based on that act, that medical procedure. And that's crazy to us, but it was a big deal back then. Now let's continue with the verse. When I saw that they were not following the truth of the gospel message, I said to Peter in front of the others, since you, a Jew by birth, have discarded the Jewish laws and are living like a Gentile, why are you now trying to make these Gentiles follow the Jewish traditions? You and I are Jews by birth, not sinners like the Gentiles, yet we know that a person is made right by God, or with God, by faith in Jesus Christ, not by obeying the law. And we have believed in Jesus Christ so that we might be made right with God because of our faith in Christ, not because we have obeyed the law, for no one will ever be made right with God by obeying the law. Peter is terrified of what they think, and he's willing to actually concede what is good and to do what is best for the kingdom of God, for community. He's focusing more on what really is like a very old example of racism and like I said, ethnocentrism, where he thinks that he's better, and he's contributing to that instead of opening up this new world to the whole gospel, to the Gentiles, to people outside of what was there before. And that is a sin in itself. But all because he cares more about what people think and what their opinion and what the consequences socially are than what is right and what he needs to do and what Jesus would call him to do. Is that a tension for you? Have you ever walked through something like that? Maybe not this specific issue, but have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're thinking, man, I know what's right here. I know what I'm supposed to say. I know what I'm supposed to believe. Or I know I'm not even supposed to be on this page, but I would rather share that post. I'd rather reshare that on Instagram or on TikTok or whatever it is. I would rather just show to everyone that, I'm kind of on the same page rather than to stand out and actually speak up against something. And some people, you may, depending on your political leanings, you might be thinking of one thing, and someone might be thinking of the opposite thing, and you're thinking of a different person. But at the end of the day, it's not about what that is. It's about, are you willing to concede what you know is good and what Jesus has called us to as followers of Jesus, what is right in order to gain social clout. The thing with virtue signaling is it very rarely costs us anything. It doesn't. That's actually kind of the marker of it. It's to avoid cost. I'd rather reshare something I don't actually believe in just so that everyone thinks I'm on the same page. Or I'll just go out of my way to show everybody the good things I do so that they'll think I'm a good person. There's a number of different ways that we can approach this. But the fact is that if you do what is right, it will likely cost you something, probably financially, socially, or your time. And in this case, I think it's often going to be socially. If you do the right thing, it probably will cost you social clout. And that's hard, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's take a look in the book of Matthew. This is one of the 4 Gospels in the New Testament. Matthew, again, like a lot of other guys, but in this story, is a guy who would have spent time with Jesus, followed him, and actually had a first-hand account of his life. So we take these stories very seriously. Matthew 6, 1-4, it says, "Watch out, don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the rewards they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you." We're always so quick to show everyone the good things we do. And that's something I have tension with as well, because it seems like every time I do a good deed, I feel like I'm looking over my shoulder, seeing, did somebody see me do that? Does somebody know that I'm a good person? And that's natural, I understand that, because we live for rewards. From the moment we're in school, we want that gold sticker. It means nothing. I remember when I was in grade 2, if you were good, I don't even remember what the criteria was to get the gold sticker. But there was these names on the board. Every student had a name. And if you did something good, you got a gold star sticker next to your name. It gave nothing to me, but I was desperate to get one of these gold stars. And I wasn't very well behaved, so I very rarely got these gold stars. But it mattered to me, and I wanted the whole class to know. And we think we outgrow that, but we really tend to not. And I'm not saying it's wrong to have that tension, because I think that's a part of being human, but that tension means that we have to battle it. And we are being called in this verse, we're being called by Jesus to actually not live for that, to not seek the clout, not to seek the attention, not to seek the virtue that comes from that, but to actually do things for the right reason, because it falls in line with what Jesus has called us to. We live in a society, and you live in a generation, just as I did, but maybe even more so, that is very focused on social justice. And that's good, because Jesus cares about that. But Jesus cares about justice, and that's not malleable. Jesus cares about what's happening in the world around us, but he cares about truth. And that's not, again, a political statement. But there are so many different areas that you can go into ideologies and into different perspectives, and you can lose track of what Jesus has called us to. And you can also lose track that Jesus has called us not to look good, but to do good. And that's not always easy. So when you do good, when you do something like to go to a homeless shelter and serve there, and that's kind of like the cliche, right? But do you have to share it on Instagram? Do you have to? When you do good, do you have to show people that you've done it? As they're talking about these hypocrites, these Pharisees, these people back then in this verse who were loud and boisterous and share everything that they do, every good thing that they do, because goodness forbid that somebody would ever not know that they're good people. But that doesn't develop you. That doesn't make you into the person God's called you to. That's just an expression of the pride in your heart. And like I said, that's not wrong to have in your heart. It's wrong to let it control you. You're going to be tempted by that all the time. But we need to choose to live in a way and to choose to express ourselves in a way that shows that Jesus is in our heart, not our own self-interest. And this is the thing, don't be weird. Like, you don't have to be weird about it. If you do something good, you don't have to be like looking around like, I hope no one sees me. I hope no one sees me. There's a homeless person over there, and I want to help them really bad. Or my cousin is going through a hard time, and I want to help. But oh man, I don't want her mom to know. I don't want anybody to know. I can't let anybody see that I'm doing good things. I actually just have to hide it. I have to be strategic, because if anybody knows, it falls on deaf ears, and I don't want to be a virtue signaler. Like, you don't have to be weird. So maybe you've never heard of this term before, but fasting is something in the Bible where people would spend time to not eat. And it's something that we still do, and something probably don't talk about it enough, but as a part of a Jesus-based life where you would just take a break from food. Some people for a long time, some people one meal, some people for a day, and just spend time focusing, instead of on that comfort, on God and seeking God through that time. And in the Bible, there was these Pharisees that kind of reflected what we talked about here, and they would spend all this time telling everybody that they were fasting. And Jesus says, don't tell everybody about when you fast. So when I was growing up, there was a guy who was fasting, and I asked him why he wasn't eating at the dinner that we were at, and he was, I can't tell you. What? Why aren't you eating at dinner at a restaurant? I can't tell you. I can't tell you. I'm like, is it a medical problem? Like, what's going on? Is like, we were 14, right? So I'll give him a bit of a break, but you don't have to do that. You can simply say, yeah, man, I'm fasting. Cool, man, great, let's move on. Don't have to make a big deal out of it. We're not hiding. We're not taking it to the extreme on this side. You don't have to hide and pretend you're not doing good things, but are you actively trying to show and strategize that you are a good person, to show everyone that stuff? Because you need them to know, and because you want the recognition. That is not the heart that Jesus has for us. Social media drives a lot of this. You need to know this about Jesus. What we're talking about here is a Jesus-based life. When we say a Jesus-based life, you are following Jesus. You want to reflect Jesus in everything you do. We want to live, think, and act, and in everything we do and what we speak like Jesus, because he is the perfect marker. And you need to know that Jesus' whole life was actually socially against the grain. There was tons of legalism. There was tons of lies and like it said here, virtue signaling. Jesus, everything he did, while it was good and often seen through a good lens now, it was in conflict with the culture at the time. And that's why he eventually was murdered, because he became a problem for the culture, because he spoke the truth. Jesus gave up all of his social virtue in the name of what is right, in the name of what God wants for his people. And frankly, that's what made him worth following. Because when you just virtue signal, when you just go with the flow on everything, you're not leading. You're not leading anything. You're just falling in line. And we live in a culture where we all want to be influencers, but so many of us don't and aren't willing to be leaders. And there's nothing wrong with influencers on the internet, right? Like, that's not a shot at anybody who does that or anybody that you follow. But I'll say that not every influencer is a leader. Because there's a difference between leaders and influencers in that influencers don't have the power necessary to shape a movement. If you're just trying to influence people through your social media, through your different platforms that you have, whether that's in your friend group or online or in person, whatever it is, and it's just about influencing, if it's just about driving people towards you and building your personal brand, that's a problem. That doesn't change the world. But if you use and leverage every platform you have, whether that's online, whether that's Instagram, whether that's TikTok, whether it's your friend group, whatever it is, your family situation, your roommates at your house, I don't care. But you drive people towards what is right and what Jesus is calling you and them to, that's a leader. And I believe we're all in this room called to be leaders and use every platform we have to stand up for what is true, what is good, and not just what will make us more popular. And that sounds good. I don't think there's many people here who are thinking, Jeff, that's wrong. You're wrong. I disagree. But when it comes time to speak truth, and when it comes time to be true to what Jesus has called us to, and not just go with the flow, it will be difficult. But know that you're called to something that matters and is worthwhile. And that it doesn't matter for a period of time what society thinks of you, just at the cost of what is true. Let me say this as well. Your offense for injustice is not justice. Just sharing something on social media to show everyone that you're on the same page doesn't actually change the world around you. Jesus put himself out there in tons of situations. He went against the grain, like I said, socially. But when he saw injustice, he spoke up against it, but he actually acted and did something about it. We live in a society where we feel like because we acknowledge injustice around us, if we acknowledge that it offends us, that we're actually acting in the name of justice. But we need to be people who are willing to act in positive ways and step into those spaces as well. Because it's so easy to share something on social media, but it's not enough. That doesn't mean that you actually care. The actual step to press reshare or whatever it is, whatever that next step is to show that your account is in line with everything else, you actually sometimes need to step out into uncomfortable spaces. Jesus did, and it cost him dearly, but he calls us to walk in his footsteps to do the same thing in response to what he's done for us. So are you willing to stand up for justice when it's hard, to do more than just press share? And are you willing to be people that don't just care about what people think about you, but actually care about truth and justice? I want to give a bit of a benediction to you. I want to speak these words over you as the project, because this is a hard thing, and I'm not here to judge you tonight because we're all walking through this. This is our society, this is our culture, and it's not easy. It's not. But may you be people who stand up for what is not only good, but for what is right. May you have the guts to stand strong through the waves as they try to wash over you. May you be people who are bold, but yet loving. May you be people who care more about what it means to follow Jesus than to follow trends. And may you be people who care more about glorifying Jesus through whatever platform you are given than building your own influence or building your own brand. May you be people who change the world. May you be people who do what is right. And the project, may you be people who change Edmonton for Jesus.
anxious imagination beckons a calmness that is found in you alone. And it washes over every doubt, every imperfection. Jesus, your presence is the comfort of my soul. There's nowhere I'd rather be when you're singing over me. I just wanna be here with you. I'm lost in your mystery. I'm found in your love for me. I just wanna be here with you. Here in the waiting, I won't worry about tomorrow. No need to focus on the things I can't control. And all my attention on the wonder of this moment. Jesus, your presence is the comfort of my soul. There's nowhere I'd rather be when you're singing over me. I just wanna be here with you. I'm lost in your mystery. I'm found in your love for me. I just wanna be here with you. So that I be consumed with who you are. Oh, the glory of your presence. What more could I ask for? So that be consumed with who you are. Oh, the glory of your presence. What more could I ask for? So that be consumed with who you are. Oh, the glory of your presence. What more could I ask for? There's nowhere I'd rather be when you're singing over me. I just wanna be here with you. And I'm lost in your mystery. I'm found in your love for me. Ooh, I just want
lockstep with you this week. That you would continue to have us be leaders for you, to honor you with our actions, that we would guide those around us. And Father, that you would just continue to bless us as we go about our summer. We ask this in your name.